All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kathy. I'm going to be doing the Dispatch Central training today. Throughout the training, I'll stop for questions a few times, and if you have a question, you're going to want to use the raise hand option on your control panel, and then I'll unmute you so that everyone can hear your question and the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's a couple of different ways to access Dispatch Central. You can go through the service menu to dispatch and then Dispatch Central, but we also have an icon for it, which is this blue icon here. So when you click on that, that'll take you directly to it. The idea behind the Dispatch Central is that you can do almost everything from start to finish on a work order. You can enter a call, a service call, as it comes in, and open a work order, post some notes and things like that to it, and then also get it ready for closing and close it from within the screen. There's also a lot of tabs with useful information about that customer, that equipment in here as well. So there's a lot that you can do all within Dispatch Central that you normally would have done previously in the service menu, in different places in the menu. When you first get in the screen, your branch will default. You can overwrite that with a different branch if you need to. When you press enter, it'll take you to contact, and that's the contact name of the person calling in the service call. And the customer, it works just like the customer search everywhere else. If you know the number or ID, you can type that in. Otherwise, you can type in the first few letters of the search key, press enter, and it'll pull up your list. And then there, it'll let you select the correct ship-to location. After you do that, a couple of things that may come up automatically if you're using them or want to use them in the future. The zone is something that can be set up in the customer master, and that's a way to do your dispatches by zone in zone locations. The other thing is the service level. If you do anything like use platinum, silver, any kind of service levels, that will show up as well. Both of those items come into this screen automatically, and they're pulled from the Customer Master. So under the Credit Customer Master, I'll show you where those fields pull from in case you want to use those. In the Customer Info screen, the field called Field Service Zone is where that zone's coming from. The service level is a drop-down box, so that's something that we have to actually set that up for you guys. Because it's customizable, you can make it whatever you want or whatever applies to you guys. Once those are set up, then you'll be able to select them on each customer, and then when you create a call for that customer, that's how it pulls this in. The service rate's a little bit different. There's a way to enter a labor code into an environmental variable that'll come up. I don't know if that'll apply to you guys because it'll pull up the same labor rate for everybody based on that code. Well, based on that code and also the customer's labor class. Okay, so after you've selected the customer, the information that it pulls in also are the job location, in other words, the ship-to address, and the phone number and fax and all of that. Over to the right, it'll show you what their credit limit is and what the credit available is. And then you have a spot here to put in a PO number if the customer gives you the PO number, right up front when you take the call. Otherwise, of course, you can enter that later. When you get to the unit ID, this works the same as it does opening work orders or anywhere else through the program. An F6 on the unit ID brings up your inventory list, whereas if you enter through that to the manufacturer field, that'll pull up the list of just this customer's equipment. And of course, you can sort by these if you need to. And then you can double-click on the appropriate piece of equipment. After you do that, and I'll point out real quick one thing you notice, when you select a customer, if they have any rentals, it'll automatically highlight this Active Rentals tab. After you select a piece of equipment, you may get more highlights because it's letting you know that there's detail about that piece of equipment for that customer in all of these tabs. Once you enter through that information, it takes you to the notes. The first line of the description is something that shows up all over throughout the program, so that really should be a generic, brake job, oil leak, that kind of thing, because it makes it easy to look stuff up. But you have 3 lines to put in a full description. After you enter through the description fields, it takes you to the billing reference. The billing reference shows up in 3 different places, and it is also customizable. So you'll want to come up with something that applies to you guys. What typically happens is at the time of the call entry, the billing reference may be something like, waiting for dispatch, tech on site, waiting for parts, warranty, things like that. We talked a little bit yesterday during training about maybe putting internal or customer pay or things like that in there. And then throughout the different stages of the call, you have the ability to change that. So if it's waiting on parts right now, and later it becomes tech on site, and then eventually becomes ready for review for close or ready to close, you have 3 different lists that you can choose from there, and I'll show you those again throughout the training. So in your billing reference drop-down, you'll just select the one that applies right now. Then it takes you to the action, and you have 3 choices there. If you add to dispatch, all that's doing is setting the call up. It doesn't open the work order. You don't necessarily have to assign a tech at that point or anything like that. If you choose open work order and add, it will open a work order at the same time along with adding it to the dispatch log. And what work order is open is for is, let's say you've already opened a work order on this piece of equipment. Maybe it's because you're going back out for the 2nd time or something like that. That'll let you enter an existing branch and work order number, and then it'll add it back into the log. That will only work if the branch and work order that you're putting in has a match, an exact match on the customer and the equipment information. So that does have to match. But right now I'm just going to add it to dispatch. Then when you get to the technician field, you can enter the tech number if you know it, or you can F6 and select the tech number. Mine pulled in automatically because I had that set up to do that, which I can show you later. Then when you get to the priority, the defaults are high, medium, low, and none. I've added one called PM to mine. That drop-down is also something that we can customize for you. And so if you come up with something different you want to put in your priorities, we can do that. The next field is where you select whether this is a field work order, a shop work order, or a PM. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that on field. And then a couple of other things that you have on this screen are informational things for you. If you click on Equipment Memo, which it'll highlight in red, not all, but a couple of these buttons. If there's data there, it'll highlight them in red. When you go to Equipment Memo, this will show you actually 2 different sets of notes. The one on the top comes from the machine population or machine ownership maintenance notes. In other words, the notes that have been entered, since it was the customer's equipment. The notes that are on the bottom are the ones that come from the equipment memo notes under inventory control. So you can see everything that's ever been entered on that equipment all on one screen. The site notes button, if it's highlighted, means that there's data there. And where that comes from is under service, the machine maintenance schedule site notes. So if there's any information in there, that'll highlight that button as well. The email addresses button, when you click on that, what that's going to show you is if there's any email addresses for the service department, and the reason it's just the ones for the service department is because we're in the service module, it'll show those email addresses there for you as well. And then lastly, the customer notes. This comes from the customer-specific notes that can be entered through Credit Customer Master or a couple of places throughout the program. Customer Central is one of them. And that would show you only your service notes, since that one is the one that's by department. Okay, so then down on the bottom, if you needed to cancel this for any reason, you're not going to enter it, you could click the cancel button. Otherwise, if you're ready to log the call, when you click on log call, all it's doing at this point is adding it to the dispatch log because we didn't choose to open a work order yet. So the next tab is the dispatch log. All of the dispatches come in call number order. So this defaults in call number order, so any new call goes to the bottom. So mine's down here at the bottom. And I want to talk about this screen a little bit before we go into that one. The first column is your priority, like high, medium, low, or whatever you decide to change it to. And then it has the date and time it was logged, the mechanic if you assigned one, the branch, work order information. The parts column, if you've ordered parts and they're back ordered to a work order, that'll say B/O. If the parts have been received, it'll say PTS. And if it's blank, there's no parts on that work order. And then you have your customer ID and name, the zone if you're using that, unit information as far as unit ID, make, model, and serial number. The call number is just a numeric thing. It'll start from 1 and go forever. The service level if you're using it. The UID is the user name of the person who logged the call. And then if there's a tech assigned, you'll see their name, as well as if you added a billing reference, you'll see that over here to the right. Any of the fields in this screen can be sorted by that column. So if you click at the top of the column, it resorts it in that order. So you can do it by date or anything. So if I resort this by call number, it took mine from the bottom to the top. And one thing I wanted to point out was the calls that have everything they need as far as there has been a work order opened and a tech assigned will show up in blue. Where something is missing, it'll show up in black. So you can see mine is in black because I haven't opened a work order for this yet. A couple of the other things you can do in the screen down at the bottom, if you're using this for dispatches for field and PMs, but if you're also keeping track of shop jobs in here, you have the choice down here at the bottom to only look at the ones you want to look at. So if you unclick field and PM, you'll only see shop jobs. If you click only field, you can see that, and if you click only PM, you can see that. So that's a way to filter down that screen. The other way that you can filter is with the filter box over here on the right. That'll let you look at all of the calls just for a specific tech or a specific customer or ship to or zone. Excuse me. If you put in a tech number, then you'll see it'll pull up only the calls that are in there for that tech. I'm going to put you guys on hold for 1 second while I get a cough drop. Okay, sorry about that. Don't want to lose my voice on you mid-training. Okay, so the next thing, again, you can sort by customer. And you can even break it down to ship to. So, for example, if I put this customer in, I can see all of his 000 and 001 ship tos. But if I wanted to look at just the 001s, I could do that. And then you can also break this down by zones, if you're using them. So, and that's handy for if you do use zones. If you want to hand a tech a bunch of calls that's going all to one area, you could break it down to just what's in that area. A couple of the other options are on here. If you click on a record and click printer at the bottom, that just prints out, it's just kind of a dispatch printout that shows the last few work orders that happened in the last few PMs and the information about this particular dispatch. The PM button takes you to a PM calendar that we're going to come back to later. And the show checklist really only is designed to work with if you're using the remote field service techs where they have their own laptops in the fields and they're filling out checklists electronically. Okay, so once you have a call in the log, a couple of things happens. If you double-click on it, that's going to take you back to the basic information that you entered for the call. So if at this time, if you want to add a PO number, change any notes or anything like that, you can. Over on the right, you can change the technician or add in a technician. Down at the bottom, you can change the billing reference. So, you know, if you're waiting for parts, and that's been the status all along, and at this point, you know, you're sending a tech on site, that would be when you would, you know, perhaps change this to tech on site. You have the quick buttons again in here where you can look at the equipment memo, which this is just the machine ownership maintenance memo notes, not the ones from inventory. And the site notes, again, takes you back to site notes. And then, of course, email addresses will show you any service email addresses. Mainly from here, if you haven't opened a work order yet, if you click on the drop-down box for action, This gives you the other choices that you had in the front screen, where you can now go ahead and open a work order, or if the work order is already open, it'll let you enter the work order information. So I'm going to click on Open Work Order and Add, and again, I could put a tech in there at this time if that was necessary. You have the option still here to change this to Shopper PM if you need to. And the completed we're going to come back to later. That's how you complete a call and get it out of the dispatch log. So when you select Open Work Order and Add and you click OK, that takes you to the work order header screen, just like you've always used, where you can enter the rest of the work order information. And click Add, and that's going to actually create the work order, and it'll put that work order number on that call. So now when we go back to the dispatch log, you can see that it gave it the work order number here. And now that's also in blue because it has everything it needs. All right, so I'm going to stop there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions. If you do, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, it doesn't look like it yet. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of these other tabs and things prior to posting some things to this work order and closing it. One of the things that you can do in this dispatch log screen are if you right-click on a call, what it does is it's going to change all of the calls for that customer to red. It also highlights some of these buttons up here based on the customer and the unit that you selected. So that means that for this particular customer and unit, I have more data or more detail in the rest of these tabs. Just makes it a little easier to look at. From there, one of the things you can do is, because I've selected something, then I'll know, that those are the items that I'm looking at in the rest of these tabs. So, for example, if I go to PM History, the unit that was on the work order I right-clicked on is up here at the top. So that just shows me that unit information. And all of this below for PM History is all of the PM history for that unit. And again, you can sort by these columns. So this is showing me what my work order numbers were, the PM codes, segments, dates, and meters that were on those work orders. If you go to PM Schedule, that's going to show you all of the units that this customer has on PM with the code and their next date and hours, last date and hours, and their frequency, how often you're doing them. But also it highlights in red the particular unit that you had right-clicked on so that you can find that easily. If you go to Current Work Orders, this will show you all of the current work orders for that customer, and in red it'll show you any of the ones for that particular unit. So you'll see everything that's open no matter what the unit, but in red you'll see the one that you right. So this is all the current work orders for that. And again, you can sort by these columns. If you double click, it's going to take you to work order and go to job summary and review what's, and then exit will take you back out. So that's how you get into the work order and inquire from that screen. The other thing that you have is the work order history. And if you look at the work order history by equipment, then everything is going to be in red because it's the one you right-clicked on. And the idea behind this is it will show you all of the customers that equipment was ever opened to. So, for example, if you have internals, so if you did a pre-delivery, you had any warranty, you had customer pay, or any of that, you would see all of the jobs for that particular unit all in this one screen. And again, and it shows you your close date. And in this screen, if you double-click, again, it takes you to the work order inquire and lets you look at that work order. Let me find one here. Oh, I was trying to find one detail on it. The other option that you have in here is the by customer. If you do that, it's showing you only the detail that's there for the customer that you selected when you right-clicked in the dispatch log. So this is everything, all the work order history for that customer, and then again it highlights in red the equipment that you had right-clicked on or was on the work order that you right-clicked on. And again, you can sort these columns. Also, throughout the entire dispatch program, anytime you have a list view like this or what looks like a grid, you can click on a record on the Excel button and export that to Excel to create a report. The other thing that you can do from the work order history tab for these closed work orders is if you click on a work order that's closed, it'll bring up a reopen button. And if you click on that, that's going to take you directly to the work order close reopen screen where it defaults to pay, which will of course reopen the work order and create a credit message for it. So you can do that right from this screen. Tab is the customer equipment. Full list of equipment for that customer. Again, in red, you'll see the unit highlighted that we right-clicked on. So everything for that customer shows up here. If you double-click on it, it pulls that information in and takes you back to the call entry with some of the information that's there, and then you can from there. So you could immediately go to the customer equipment screen and do a double-click, and that would fill in some of your information on the call entry screen. The part that's where we're going to do some of our posting to the work order. The active rentals tab will show you any rentals that that customer has all in one place. Of course, you can sort by here, on rent dates, expected return dates, and all of that. If you go to prior dispatch, what this shows you is any prior dispatches for that customer. And again, excuse me, sorry about that. And again, highlighted in red, you'll see the piece of equipment that you were right-clicked on. Okay, so before we go to the posting part of the work order, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go on. So when you want to post notes and things to a work order, what you're going to do is click on the work order in the dispatch log, and then you can click on your parts and labor tab. Now, not everyone uses this for posting parts and labor. This screen is mostly used by field service techs if you're using that. However, there's some things in there that can be handy, particularly the notes are a little easier to enter through here than through work order close reopen. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you post parts through here, although for training purposes I'm going to show you, how that works and what it looks like. Time can be posted through here, so if you normally only use elapsed time, you could do that here. If you normally sit down and enter a stack of time cards, you may still want to do that through work order time card entry because it might be a little bit faster, but you do have the option in here if you decide to do that. This screen is kind of made up of a way to do everything to one work order at one time, complete it and close it, as opposed to doing things in batches like entering all of your time and then entering all of your parts and so on. So in this screen, once you've selected your work order, the first thing it takes you to is segment, and that's where you're going to choose the segment that you're posting your labor parts or notes to. And it fills in your equipment information and all of that then. Then it takes you to hour meter, where you can enter an hour meter or update it if you need to. The next thing it takes you to is work time. And what this is a list of labor codes that apply to this customer based on their class. So you could select the labor codes you normally would have used in time card entry. Then this bottom box gives you a calendar where you can select the labor date. You could also manually type it in. And then you guys won't use the time on, time off. That's for something else, but you can do elapsed time through the screen. So if I go to total time and put however many hours are on this work order, then it's going to calculate those hours for me and post them to the work order. Then below that's where you can select whether this is regular time or overtime or premium time, and if you use them, the over or premium time that are billed at regular rate. Okay, the next option is the parts used. Again, I can't see you guys using this since you're not doing field service, but just for training purposes, I want you to see what it does. This lets you enter a quantity and a part number and select it, and it posts the work order. The reason we don't recommend you use this if you're not using field service is because it doesn't do as much to make sure you're using the right requisition branch and all of that you normally do through work order detail entry. But I wanted to do a complete work order here and show you what it's right. If there's any flat rate controls set up for this segment, those will pull in automatically. If there's not, you can enter a code here. If you're using a comp code, consistent. Down in the bottom, there's some choices for entering miscellaneous charges. So if you have miscellaneous parts charges or like outside labor and things like that, that can be entered here as well. Again, this is not something you would typically do if you weren't using the field service, but it is there. The main thing I think in here that I could see you guys using would be the notes section. Because this is free form, so it's a little easier to use than the grid form that's in the work order close and reopen screen. You can also copy and paste to this screen where you can't in the other screen, but this is where you can type in your invoice notes. The other thing you have here is if you click on the check spelling, it works kind of like a Windows spell check. It'll come up and tell you if it found something wrong and let you, select the right thing or put a replace with and hit change and make that correction for you. So one thing you'll notice right here, it says invoice notes. What you type in here when you're under invoice notes are going to be something that's going to print on the invoice that the customer would see. Your other option here is if you click the change button, this will change and say internal notes. And this would just be something that you guys wanted to see internally that you did not want on the invoice, but you may want somebody else to see, like somebody who's reviewing it or something like that. Anytime you make any changes to this screen, you have to click the Update Work Order button. That's what actually saves it. It will, however, if you forget to click that and you go to and try to go to another tab, it'll tell you that you have, unsaved information. Do you want to save it? And then you can say yes. So it won't let you just get out of there without saving it. Okay, a couple of other things that you have down at the bottom. If you go to equipment specs, that takes us back to those note screens that we saw earlier. Again, machine population notes and your equipment memo notes. If you go to customer notes, that's your customer-specific notes that are related just to the service department. And if you go to show detail, what that does is it shows you all of the detail that's been posted to this work order. So my type 3s, of course, are my notes. My type 1 here is my parts. My type 5 is my labor. Type 7 is, I believe, miscellaneous. One thing I wanted to point out in here is where it says all segments. If you have a work order with multiple segments that have things posted to them, then over here you would see all those different segment numbers and everything that was on the work order. Whereas if you just wanted to look at the segment you were in right now, you could unclick all segments and you would only see that segment. And this screen again shows you the type, the tech, and some of these fields will have data based on what type of entry it is, and some of them will not. For example, with the parts, you'll see like ordered and shipped. With the labor, you'll see ordered and shipped, and the type of hours and things like that. Then when you close that, that will take you right back. So that's something that we tell people who are posting things through here. You can look at your show detail first to make sure that there's not, labor parts already on there already and you're not duplicating anything. The work order checklist button, and then also when you're doing a PM checklist button will show up. And those relate back to the show checklist I talked about earlier that really only gets used with when you're using the field service remote tech stuff. So I won't go over that at this time. So at any rate, that's how you can go in and post some things to the work order, directly from dispatch. Again, that may not apply to you. You may want to post time cards through time card entry. As opposed to here, but it is an option, and I do think that the notes here is a little simpler to use than it is in the other screen. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions. If you do, raise your hand. Did you guys have a question?
Yeah, on the customer notes where you put the customer notes in. That wrap, does it do a text wrap?
Do you mean in this invoice notes field? Yes, it does.
So you could put your notes in there for the job. It would do the spell check and it would text wrap right there. So when if you put them in the other way, you have to go line by line and you got to guess which letter is going to transfer down. So
that's absolutely right. That's why I like it better. I think that this is easier to use, and I'm gonna show you that screen so you can see how they pull over. But they pull over. When you get to the close reopen section, it still looks the same like a grid, but by doing it here and letting it pull over there, I just think it's a little easier to enter them here.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go back out to the dispatch log. Once you have everything posted and the job is done and all of that, when you double-click on the work order, at that point is when you would want to use the completed. And marking this completed is what takes it out of the dispatch log and puts it to the $$ screen to get it ready to close. So I can say this is completed and it took however many trips. And at this point I can change my billing reference to ready for review, which may be different than what you guys decide to use, but I know I'm done with this. All I need now is, if you guys do it this way, like you have a service manager or somebody review it before you actually close it, that's where these billing references come in handy at. So I'm going to say this is completed and click OK. And again, that's going to take it out of my dispatch log, and now it's put it into the $$ screen. Okay, so the $$ screen are all the things that somebody marked completed. It works just like the other screens. You can sort them by any of these columns. And in here you have all the standard work order information, priority, customer, and all of that. The billing reference really becomes handy in here because somebody who just closes work orders who doesn't really do all of the rest of it, and I'm not sure how it works exactly at your place, but they could easily see that there were things in here that were ready for review or things that are ready to close, things that might be warranty, stuff like that. The checklist column won't really apply to you guys because that goes back to the field service checklist that we talked about. And then the logged by is, again, just whoever logged the call initially. So again, you can sort by these, and I did that to put mine at the top of the column. A couple of other things you can do in this screen, and we're going to go to the closing process here in a minute, are if you're looking just for something specific based on the billing reference, at the bottom, if you click on Filter, it gives you a list box with all of your potential billing references in there, and you can choose one, and that'll pull in only the things you asked for. So again, that can be handy for closing purposes. And if you unclick that, it brings them all back. The other thing you can do is, so for example, if I was a service manager and I decided to look at maybe all of the things that are ready for review, I could go down through these and review them all. And to review, and we're going to do this again in a minute, but you just double-click, and when you double-click, that takes you to the work order close screen, the close reopen, where you could preview the invoice or whatever you needed to do. Once you did that, you could go through and mark these as ready to close. That way the person closing them would know that. And to do that, you click on one, and down at the bottom where it says Change Billing Reference, that's where I would change this to Ready to Close. So again, this is a screen where the billing references really come in handy at. The other thing that you can do in this screen is, let's say you marked something completed, whether it's, you did it accidentally, or maybe you thought it was completed, but now the customer's called back and you've got to go back out. You don't have to go through the whole process through call entry and all of that to get the call back into the dispatch log. You can just click on the line and click the reopen button. That takes it out of $$ and takes it back to the dispatch log. So that's just a quick way to do that. Reopen there does not have anything to do with reopening a work order. It takes it out of $$ and puts it back to the dispatch log. Also, as you're going through and making changes, you can use the refresh button to make sure that this particular screen, everything is refreshed as far as your billing references and all of that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my call. I'm going to say, well, I went in and reviewed this, and at some point I decided that this call was, accidentally put it out to the log again. Get it back here. So if I've already reviewed this, I can go in and say, now it's ready for close. And then the person closing can find that easily, and they know it's ready to close. And to close it, you're just going to double-click on it, again, which takes you to the Work Order Close Reopen screen. And from here, you can do all the same things that you did before in the service Work Order Close Reopen screen. And make sure all of that's updated. Do your segment reviews or segment summaries. Look at the detail. The main thing I wanted to show you in here was when you go to Notes, how much you put in that other box. It'll split that out here for you. So those will already be there, and you won't have anything cut off or anything like that. You still have the spell check option in here if you need to use it. And then any internal notes are the same way. It puts the internal notes in here and then separates them out, on the separate lines for you. If you make any changes here, just like you normally would, you would hit the Update button. And I also wanted to point out in Customer Specific, this is where, when we saw the Customer Notes button throughout the program, this is where it was coming from. And that's because if you have customer-specific information set up for the service department, those are the things that will show up when you're in dispatch and in the Work Order Close Reopen and the Inquire screens. So once you know that this work order is ready to go, you can go back to the header, and at this point you can go ahead and close it. And that's what's going to create the invoice, of course, and it's going to take it out of the $$ screen. So that's that whole process from beginning of the call to posting the entries, putting the notes in and closing it. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the PM button down at the bottom. And I think, later at some point we're going to do a PM training, but I did want to point this out. The PM calendar in here, what it allows you to do is, instead of going through service, machine maintenance schedule, and scheduled maintenance, and opening up everything that's due through a certain date, what the calendar does, it pulls up and shows you, what's due for each given day. And I want to show you a month that has a lot in it. That's why I'm going backwards there. It'll show for each day, it'll highlight in blue that there are PMs due, and then down below the date it has a number, and that tells you how many are due for that day. So when you click on that day, it turns it red, and then down at the bottom you can see the PM that's due. So if you have multiples, like this one has 2, you'll see both. Okay, and this shows you whether the work order's already been open or not, and what zone, the tech that's assigned, the customer information, the equipment information, and over to the right, it'll show you the last PM work order number, the contact for those PMs and the phone number, what their credit status is. So it'll say exceeded limit if they're over their credit limit or past due. These two fields you won't use. We just have one customer that uses those. But then it'll show you the last date it was done and the frequency. And if you have a contract number in there, you'll see that also. That just shows you for each individual day. Also down at the bottom, if you click on the one that says overdue, that's going to show you all of the PMs that are overdue based on the month that you selected up here. So all your overdue PMs show up down here. Okay, at the top, you have the choice of looking at just everything for a specific month, but also if you were trying to narrow it down to a specific customer, you could type that customer ID in. And that would show you everything for that customer. So I know that all of these belong to that particular customer, which works well for updating next due dates and things like that, so you can keep them all together, you know, for dispatch purposes. Same thing with the zones. I'm not sure if I've got zones on those or not, but we'll see. No, I don't. And then also same thing for a tech. If they were was a specific tech assigned to PMs already, and you wanted to see everything for that tech, you would see that as well. So just another way to filter it all. So one of the benefits to using this as opposed to going through scheduled maintenance is that when you go through scheduled maintenance and you open all the work orders up through a certain due date, what happens is if you're flat rating those, for example, that all ends up on your work in process report because they're already open, whereas going this route, you can open things as they come due, and once you find out that you're going to be able to do them. And that's why we put the options down here with the contact name and the phone number so that you could see what's due, make your phone calls to find out if you can do them. And if you can't do them right now, you have the choice in this screen to skip them like you did previously in the machine, in the service, and then under maintenance, machine maintenance schedule, machines by customer. So it's the same click here, and if you reschedule a PM, it'll let you type in a date manually. If you do a skip, it'll calculate the next due date based on the interval. And assign a PM will let you assign a technician number to the PM right now. So all the same things you have in machines by customer, but just a different way to get to it. So I'm going to go find one that's not already open here. Okay, if you, again, when you click on it, if the work order is open, it'll say yes. It'll say no if it's not. So I have one here that's not been opened yet. So if we decided that we were going to go ahead and do this PM, we wanted to open the work order, when you click on that line, then you have some choices up here as to whether you only want to open the work order or if you also want to add it to dispatch. And you can assign a tech to it at this point, too, if you want. So if I have all of these filled in, then that's going to end up in my dispatch log in blue because everything that I need is there. So then when you click on Go, that's what's actually taking and putting it back to the dispatch log. So when I go back out now, to refresh your dispatch log, you can right-click, and that refreshes, and that'll make your call show up. And, of course, it'll be down at the bottom. Whoops, I don't have it resorted. Actually, it's at the top because I had it resorted by call number. So then you can see it creates the PM work order and everything here. And everything else you do from this point is the same as you do to any other work order like I did earlier. It's just that this was a way to get it as a PM work order and in the log, and to do it, you know, based on what really is due and what we can go do. If we end up doing PM training, we'll go through this again. But everything that you do the other way, you can do through here. And like I said, it's a little more, it's a little cleaner way to keep your work in process clean. Okay, does anybody have any questions?